Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor, sometimes.
My name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Always.
Always.
How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing okay. Yeah. I'm doing okay. This is gonna be, I think it's like a bigger kind of a meatier episode, hopefully, because we're gonna focus on something that I've been interested in for a while, and this was a good excuse for me to watch a movie that I've been wanting to see for a long time. We're going to talk about prison escape movies. Initially, I was going to be like, oh, let's just talk about prison movies. But then if you really kind of dig deep or drill down, like a lot of prison movies or movies set in prisons or that incorporate prisons in them are prison escape movies. I will say that like I wouldn't consider The Rock as a prison escape movie because you're literally trying to get into the prison to get the bad guys out of the prison. So that's a little bit different. Although, I mean, I think that is a fun movie, but I don't think that a movie like that would necessarily qualify for this discussion. But so just to kind of like, I would say the movie needs to involve some sort of prison inmate escaping from a prison or a prisoner of war escaping from some sort of compound that they've been forced into and kept there against their will.
Okay, but I have a question about that because doing research and I fell down a rabbit hole. And I've watched 2 or 3 movies I have never seen and a couple of movies that I have seen before. So that was the fun rabbit hole. But then I started to research top 10 escape prison movies. And things were coming up that I thought were interesting because I never thought of them as a prison escape movie. But in the definition, you said an inmate escaping from a prison, right? So that could be up to interpretation. So is Snowpiercer a prison escape movie?
Well, without spoiling it, it was... See, that's interesting because I thought about that. I saw that on the lists. And I think that if you look at it from the fact of someone that is in a particular place that they don't have control of leaving that place, I could see that. But the people in the front of the train and the people in the back of the train are held captive in a similar manner. It's just the people in the front of the train have a completely different life than the people in the back of the train. And the people in the back of the train have no control over that. So you could say, I mean, I guess in a similar way, the inmates and guards are both in the same physical space, although the power dynamic is super shifted one way. So I could see similarities there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
okay,
I consider that more of like a prison. That'd be more like a prison revolt movie. Like I said, I'm trying not to spoil the ending, but you can kind of see where I'm going with that statement. But
yeah, it's a class warfare film for me.
Definitely.
It's, the man keeping the lower man down. So I don't necessarily think of it as an escape movie per se, but I see why people defined it like that. Well, how about Room?
I think that's definitely someone kept against their will and someone who doesn't want to be there.
We'll talk about this, but there's a lot of qualities to these films that are very similar. Obviously, because, it's a prison and you're escaping from it, and the mental fortitude that it would take to do that is definitely a theme, and hope is definitely a theme in all of these movies. But there are little things that seem to be part of these films that actually defined Room as a prison escape movie for me, because when I wrote down these things for Shawshank Redemption and other films that we're going to talk about, Room has those too. And so I thought, oh, well, it's definitely not one that would immediately have come to mind. But once I defined how I was looking at this genre or sub-genre, if you want to call prison films the genre and then escape films a sub-genre, somebody did online, so it must be true. Room definitely falls underneath that. And I thought that's a very interesting way to look at that movie, because you look at a prison escape movie differently than you look at an abused woman and her son movie. Even though the abuse is similar to a degree, the difference would be for me that she is held against her will for not doing anything but walking down the wrong street at the wrong time. That's it. That she's not an anti-hero who has done something wrong and has paid for it in jail and wants to get out of jail. She's not a hero who has done not is innocent and has no way of proving it and keeps getting more tragedy heaped upon him throughout the film, a la Shawshank Redemption. So yeah, that would be the difference for me, is that yes, she's being held captive and she does escape, or they do escape. And sorry, I guess you see that in the trailer anyway, don't you? I'm trying to make myself feel better about that.
You see people running. You kind of see her running, I think, in the trailer. So it's like, why would she be running? But,
yeah, that's true. Sorry, people. You know me. I can't help it. It's a disease with me. Spoilers. It's a disease. But so that would be the difference for me, is that she did nothing in anybody's eyes to warrant being held captive.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and that's completely different than I think these two other big subgenres we're going to talk about. That wouldn't fall into either one of them. You've got like kind of like the prisoners of war, prison movies, and then you've got the state prison or some sort of like American. Usually, at least the ones that I'm looking at, Shawshank Redemption, and we'll talk about Cool Hand Luke and a couple others. Where it's just a prison, someone has done something or has been convicted of a crime in which they got sent to a prison. And for whatever reason, they want to escape that prison. So, and then the prisoner of war scenario, it's like, it's not necessarily that they've done something wrong. It's that they've been caught behind enemy lines, and due to the rules of war, as opposed to if you surrender or if you're, caught and you are not in active battle, then the other side in civilized war, whatever those quotes are. But
that's an oxymoron, you should big time.
You should take these people and put them in a prisoner of war camp until the war is over, which is crazy right there. So I kind of want to focus on the latter scenario first, because I asked you to watch a movie and I hadn't seen this movie yet either, but it's a movie by Jean Renoir, and it's called La Grande Illusion, or the English saying of it is Grand Illusion, and it was made in 1937, and it stars a couple of like huge stars from that time. Jean Gabin was like the biggest star in France at the time. And then Erich von Stroheim plays kind of the quote unquote bad guy, even though he's not really a super bad guy in this movie. But he plays the head of one of the POW prisons. And at that point in time, Erich von Stroheim was kind of like on a downward trend in his career. We've seen him. We've talked about a movie that he was in as a somewhat smaller part, but Sunset Boulevard, he was the butler to Gloria Swanson. So we've definitely seen him before in a movie that we've talked about, but in this movie, he kind of plays the bad guy. So well, first of all, have you seen any Jean Renoir movies before?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I mean, I a long time ago watched The Rules of the Game, but that was way long ago, probably like 20 years ago or something. Like, I was just like, oh, look, it's a French movie and everybody says it's good. But yeah, I didn't really retain very much of that. So I definitely need to go back to that one. But so this is the first Renoir movie that I really kind of feel like I've internalized. So it's definitely an anti-war movie, and it's a movie that is focused on class, much like the movie we talk about all the time, Parasite. So in this movie, it kind of takes it draws a parallel between the more upper class or officer types on the French side of the war and the German side of the war. This is set in World War I. So this is, obviously it's before World War II. The thing came out in 1937. So World War II hadn't really, quote unquote started yet. And so that right there says that even though they go to great lengths to try to draw a parallel between these kind of like Stroheim, he plays a pilot, and then his counterpart is played by Pierre Fresnay, and he plays Boileau, and he's a pilot on the French side. And so he ends up shooting down Boileau, and they end up kind of like hanging out with each other at the beginning, and then they find they see each other later on at the end, where Bolju is one of the prisoners of Stroheim, and so they have a kinship of some kind, and then also Bolju has is obviously has much more of a kinship with his other prisoners of war. And so they kind of draw like this parallel between the upper class and the lower class, and what it ends up coming down to, for me at least, was that they make a big point of the fact of that the main reason, or the main focus of a prisoner of war is to try to expend as much energy as possible for the opponent, for the person who's holding you there. Try to get them to spend as much of their time on keeping you in the prison, so that they can't take any of the guys that are assigned to the prison and send them back out into war. The way that you can fight as a prisoner of war, you can't maybe like pick up a gun and actually fight, but you can try to get them to focus all of their attentions on you. And so they try a bunch of different ways of trying to escape, and that's a big part of the film itself. But that I thought was interesting, to kind of say that there is another way to fight in this war that is not specifically firing cannons or flying planes or dropping bombs. It's just taking the attention and resources of the people who are in charge of the POW camp and making them focus all that attention and all those resources on you, as opposed to being able to peel off and actually help the war effort in a different way. So what did you think about it?
Well, I don't know if I really got into it. I watched it, but I stayed separate from it. And, I kept thinking, is this the language? No, it's not the language. Subtitles don't bother me. What is it? Is it the age of the film? No, I like older movies. I actually don't define things as older movies or younger movies or newer movies. I don't do that because it came out in 1939, which is a great year for movies, doesn't make it any less important or any less great than something that came out last week. It just doesn't for me. The quality of film and the storytelling speaks for itself. I found it interesting. The good things that I found interesting was that I thought to myself, if people spent half the time being polite like they do to each other when they first get captured, if they spent that much time in diplomacy and politics in the world and being that polite, maybe we wouldn't be going to war. But then again, you have these people who just decide to do whatever they're going to do, which sparks war. Because if I am correct, after reading again, my understanding is that there was a subgroup called the Black Hand that killed Franz Ferdinand, right? And he was the Archduke of, help me, Austria or Austria-Hungary?
I think it was Austria-Hungary. It was together at the time.
Which sparked this war. And so you're never going to have diplomacy always win out. But I'm thinking to myself, if we could just find people who were this polite to each other, maybe we wouldn't be going to war. And I know that's an idealistic and a really, 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 really positive way to look at it, if you will. What's a rose-colored glasses way to look at it. But I'm just wondering, why can we be so polite to each other at a dinner table and offer wine and this and that and this and that, and make sure people have tea and make sure somebody's warm and make sure you're polite because you're at the same rank as this other person, but yet we're still at war. And the reason why we're being polite to each other is because one's a war prisoner and one is a commander of a prison of war. So I was dumbfounded by how polite the film was. And in an interesting way, I thought that that's a dichotomy I haven't seen in prison war movies before. Usually it's ugly. You think of anything other than this, it's ugly.
Well, no, I mean, this is a pacifist movie. And I think it's a movie that's anti-war. And Jean Renoir was a pilot, or at least he was a photographer. Now, maybe he was like a photographer and was with a pilot, and he was doing like scouting photos in World War I. So like he was in World War I and he saw what happened and was part of that war. And so making this film, he was trying to allude to the fact that you're right, those niceties that they afford to each other based on their rank or based on their class, especially the Erich von Stroheim character. What he does, allows the French officers to enable, it enables them to do what they do later on in the film. And what ends up happening is there's a perceived betrayal that's going on, I think, and the German head of the prison, von Stroheim, he can't imagine that someone would break from the tradition of that, of those strict rules, those strict, like, I treat you like this, you treat me like that, and then we treat all these other people like something else. And breaking from that kind of a tradition, it was unthinkable to him. And he didn't know it, but he was stretching himself and stretching the capabilities, or giving them a lot more leeway than he probably should have if he were to be, a better head of this prison. But really, ultimately, I think that what they're trying to say is that yes, people are people, and there's really no winner in a war. And that's an allusion to there's a book that came out in the early, I think, like, I don't know what it was, like 1909, and it was called The Grand Illusion, and it was a very popular book in France, and it came up before World War I. And so the fact that the war happened after this book that said, its main theme was that there are really no winners in a kind of like all out, like, major war, multinational war that essentially was what happened in World War II or World War I. 5 years later than that, it was Renoir kind of going back and saying, like, you see how this was kind of in some ways, Renoir's opinion was that the World War I was pointless or was detrimental, and nobody really gained anything. People, countries may have gained land, and countries may have lost land, but ultimately a lot of people lost lives. And then where were each of the countries afterwards? So that's what he's kind of trying to point out, I guess. From what I got from it and from what I read, but ultimately I think that the filmmaking itself was interesting. I am interested in the fact that the characterization of the von Stroheim character, where he is in this like back brace and has this kind of this chin constrictive thing. I think that it's, in some ways, it might be meant to be, it could have been a lot more menacing than it was, but it's the juxtaposition of the character versus what this mechanical stuff is. And Steph and I randomly watched Star Wars, like Episode 4, like the original Star Wars last night. And I got a weird kind of like feeling of Darth Vader, like a reminiscent of Darth Vader. But the character wasn't Darth Vader, but I don't know. It makes me wonder if George Lucas, I'm sure he's probably seen this movie, but I had seen that at all and they made any kind of like correlation, but it wasn't. There was definitely a juxtaposition between, like, he wasn't he was very humanized. I think everybody was humanized across the whole film, and that is something that is opposite of a movie that's like kill all the Germans or kill all the Nazis or all of this stuff. It's like they're kind of like, it's kind of like a video game where in a lot of in certain war films where it's just like everybody, if you're on the good side, then everyone on the bad side needs to be annihilated and then move on from there. This one was a lot more complex. He's growing a plant in his window, things that you wouldn't expect the bad guy to be doing. So what do you think about there's a section close to the end, because there is a large escape that is attempted, but there's a section close to the end. It seemed like it was somewhat out of place. What did you think about that section?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up.
With Dita Parlo. Yeah.
And the thing you were saying about the neck brace, real quick, and I see why you're saying Darth Vader, because especially when Darth Vader's mask is removed, it is very similar to what it looks like and how uncomfortable it looked. And, almost like, it's like when Batman rips his cowl off, you're like, wait, is that comfortable? Or are you actually showing how there's a flaw in the design of the neck of this cowl, which has been talked about by many people, by the way. But so I think it just shows fragility in being human. and he can be this hard-ass warden in this prison camp that nobody escapes from, but he's still flawed because he is still a meat puppet. And if you go down and you are in a plane crash, or you're this or whatever happened to him, I can't really remember. I think it was plane crash, right?
It was a plane crash, yeah.
Right. Your back's going to be broken. Your neck's never going to be right, but you can still be the person who makes sure nobody escapes from this prison. It's a juxtaposed thing, which I like. I get that from the movie. What I don't fully gel on, and I think it's an educational thing for me, I need to know about why people think this is a great movie in order to understand it through their eyes, in order to see it that way. We've talked about this a gazillion times. Art is in the eye of the beholder, but once you're educated on why something is considered art, you can kind of see it that way. So for me, I need to know why people are thinking this is a great movie, because it's like 3 separate movies. You have that first sequence, and then they are like ready to escape. They have a tunnel and everything. They're ready to go, and then all of a sudden they're ripped away. And that's totally different than the middle section of the film. And you say the last section, but the last section is as long for me, time-wise, as the first 2 sections. Then you go to your middle section, and you're still having this polite etiquette between people, but you actually get to see a prison escape attempt. And spoilers for The Grand Illusion. If you haven't seen this movie and you like movies, see this movie. But from this point on,
it's 90 years old.
Yeah, come on. One of the best years of movies ever made, and it was nominated for Best Picture. So that says something.
37. 1937 is when
I thought it was
39.
I thought it was 39.
This was the first foreign movie to be nominated for Best Picture.
All right, I have September 1938. It was released in the United States, and that it was nominated for the 1939 Oscars. So maybe that's where I'm getting that from.
Okay, I think it must have come out in France in 1937. So that must be the big discrepancy.
That's the big number on IMDb. You're right, because it does say Le Grand Illusion 1937. Okay, anyway, it's a great decade of films. How's that?
Yeah, there you go.
So there's a reason to see this movie, but then the middle part feels completely different than the last part, because then the last part is a love story. That's what it is. It's a love story. And we have seen this.
But it's also a love story between people from two different countries, 2 different ways of life.
Right. And we've seen this in war movies all the time. We saw it in Cold Mountain with the Natalie Portman character, where, 2 fish out of water, 2 people don't want to be involved in this, both affected. And coincidentally, both women losing their men to war, and then being faced with this other guy who is the perfect partner in any other time frame to replace their husbands, but they can't because of the circumstances of the war. Even though this one, the Grand Illusion alludes to the fact that they're going to end up together, which is what the audience is hoping at the end, because you do fall in love with them as a couple. And it becomes this domestic living situation with 2 guys. One guy's got a hurt leg. He's got to recover. Got a young girl. She's sweet. She's kind. She's a little girl. She's sweet and she's innocent. And then they have Christmas for her, and that's the sweetest thing in the world. That whole scene is so cute. And, a German Christmas tree, a German Christmas tree with the candles on it. I love that. But the thing that is interesting to me, and the reason why I would like to have an education on this film, is because I need to know how to connect those 3 parts when I'm watching this film. Because once I was in the second part, I completely forgot about the anxiety of the first part. Once I got through the second part and into the third part, that anxiety is there again, but it's in a different place. It's because there are 2 humans at the center of this who are in love now and who have found each other, despite all the odds against him in this wartime environment. So if I had seen the last 30 minutes of this movie, or last 45 minutes of this movie, and saw these separate sections, I would not know it was the same movie. I would not have connected them. And I even think they look different. Cinematography looks different in the middle section than it does, which obviously it will, because they're inside a prison, so forth and so on. But even the tonal switches that happen, there is a very farcical quality about Frenchmen in films, and that has a lot to do with the melodramatic quality of acting in the 30s. So maybe it's because their language is foreign to my ear. I don't see it as realistic as I would do if I saw a 1930s film in English, because there is a melodramatic quality. People don't speak that way in real life. So it's almost farcical in the beginning, which makes it a little bit hard to like really find the feet to this film. And it's not that I don't think it's a great movie. I just don't know why it's a great movie. For me, I've never seen The Great Escape. Oh, I never seen Stalag 17 all the way through. And I just watched both of them. And at the end of Stalag 17, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best movie ever. It's so great. And I just felt like The Grand Illusion, that's what people are coming out of it. And I'm not saying it's not there. It's just that I don't have the education in the language to understand this film, not literally the language. And the other thing I want to ask you really quick is, so there's totally 3 different films going on, which is fine. Okay. It's actually structured in 3 acts. Obviously, we've talked about that. All 3 separate stories kind of blending into one because of one of the main characters being in all 3 of the stories. But then why do they speak in their native tongue and then all of a sudden speak English?
Did you notice that the times when they spoke, especially it was the 2 kind of main guys, it was the von Stroheim character, Raffenstein, and Boldieu, the kind of head French guy, and they would kind of like fall into English when they were either contentious or were trying to be more intense with each other, especially at the last scene that they have to get. Well, that's not true. We've already said spoilers. So when Boldieu is taking the focus away from the 2 guys that are escaping, and he's running around, and the Raffenstein is like, hey, come on down. I mean, he's speaking to him in French because he knows French, and he's appealing to him in French. But I think it's one of those, like, where like your mom uses the short name and then I guess you don't have that case, but like, so my mom, she would be like Josh, and then at one point she'd be like Joshua, and it was like, I think that using English may be his, like, I'm using your full name, like, this is serious, I'm going to shoot you if you do not turn around and come back down here. Like, you might think I was joking before, but now I'm super serious. So that may be something. I mean, it also shows that, like, we are losers and only know 1 language, and they know like 3 at least.
And I will give credit where credit is due. I am a 1 language loser. I completely have guilt about that and regret, and should have spent the last 6 months of the pandemic learning an instrument or a language. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. And by the way, since it's Paul, I was Paul Scott James. It was my full name.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Which is 3 saints names, 3 last names, and 3 1-syllable names. So when I heard all 3 together, then I knew, and that wasn't always bad. It wasn't always bad. It was sometimes when you did good. Paul Scott James, look at you, so it could have gone either way, but mostly it was when I needed to come immediately. But my mom's a mom. She just looked at me the wrong way or the right way, or the silence in the room told me to get moving. Anyway, okay, so I buy into that. But what if the tides were turned and this was an English-speaking film, and then all of a sudden, when they wanted to make their point sharper, they started speaking French? Unless you're Jodie Foster, would you buy into that? It's like hard pressed. And by the way, the beginning of the film that's not true for the beginning of the film. They do speak English all of a sudden out of nowhere about silly things like wine or where to sit at the table. I don't really remember specifically, but I just thought at first it was, yes, we are not part of the dumb culture known as America. No offense, America. I love America. But they only speak 1 language and we speak 3. So let's speak it because we can. So, if we were going to another country and we're learning a second language, we would be speaking that second language between you and I to get it down. So maybe there is some kind of need to speak English because America's an ally, but there's a bunch of different allies that you're not speaking their language. But the point is that it's just not used the same way in all 3 sections of the film. So I couldn't grab a hold of why it was the way that it was. And my mind, not being educated on why this film is a great film, which granted should not be the reason why I like a movie, but it does bring some kind of color to the film that I might not understand and might bring an understanding to the film because I do know that color now. It struck me as just because we can, we will, and English sounds really strange and cool that we can speak it, so let's speak it here. Because he does use it, and they do use it a couple of times before that one scene.
They do.
That's not a Paul Scott James or Joshua. It's not that kind of moment. It's just a moment. I'm just saying that as a dumb American, I love America. Don't get me wrong. I love where I'm from. But being a one language culture, maybe it is some kind of like diss on us. Like, look what we can do in other countries. We can speak other languages and you can't. I mean, I'm sure that's not what it is, but
no, I don't think so. I think the only other thing I can think of is that maybe it's one of those things where neither one of them knows the other's language as well as they know English. So English may be a bridge language between them. It's like, I don't know the word for this in French, but I do know it in English, that kind of thing.
And that would be acceptable. And maybe in the movie, they do say that somewhere and I just missed it. Maybe they do allude to that. Actually, I like that. I like that reasoning right there. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on because we got a ton of things to talk about.
We do have a ton of things to talk about. And you brought up a couple of movies that I think definitely they fall into this same category. But you've got Stalag 17, the Billy Wilder film, and then also The Great Escape. So you've never seen either one of those?
Okay, I'm having this weird thing going on in my life right now, and I'm just going to be honest and open about it. And we're going to talk about it later on because I am under the impression that I've seen certain movies and not seen certain movies. I've read certain books and not read certain books. I have, as of late, been seeing things and reading things that I didn't think that I read. And then halfway through it, I'm like, oh, I remember this. How can I remember this? Oh, it's because I've read this before. That's never happened to me in my life. I'm pretty clear on what I have and have not read. That said, I don't remember watching Stalag 17. But I definitely remember, spoilers for Stalag 17. See this movie. It's fantastic.
It's great. Yeah.
It's really great. It is human. It is alive. It's a character study. It's all about dynamics in groups and how you can be careful what you wish for, but at the same time, don't judge a book by its cover. It's got all of those cliches in it. So spoilers from this point on, because I can't make this point without telling the ending. I remember some of it, but I always thought it was just because I'd seen like clips of it or like seen 10 minutes of it here or 15 minutes here. But when they get to escaping and the guy in the water cooler, I went, wait a second. I remember this. And then all of a sudden it came back to me. I remember the knot in the light and the chess piece, but I didn't remember it until it was actually happening.
So you got that amazing thing of where like you knew it and you had understood it in the past, but you got the discovery, the rediscovery of it when it happened again. That's so cool.
Yes. And William Holden won the Oscar, and there's some small debate that it was a makeup Oscar because he should have been nominated for Sunset Boulevard and win, but he wasn't. He didn't win, whatever. He's fantastic in this movie. And I love the fact that, is he an anti-hero? Is he a hero? What is he? Because in my opinion, he's right. The whole movie, he's right. There's nothing he does or says that isn't 100% correct. And for them to hold him accountable for one, suspicion, based on suspicion and nothing else, no other evidence other than he is who he is in war. First of all is fair in love and war. We say that all the time. So to have this character do the things that he does, and by the way, this is one of those things that are in all of these movies, the go-to guy, the get it guy, the guy who's in prison who can get anything, Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption.
And James Garner in Great Escape.
Right, exactly. And he's great in that, by the way. But William Holden, they flipped the script on you because they made him a bad guy because he was doing the things he had to do to survive. He's the bad guy because he's the one who has all the cigarettes, all of the stuff, and won't share. Well, he's no different than Richard Gere in Officer and a Gentleman. He does that in that film. Gets caught and gets in trouble for it, and then has to rectify the situation in Officer and a Gentleman. But there's always that guy in a film that does that in these type of situations. And then when William Holden says, when I got here, you guys beat the hell out of me and stole my crap. So whatever, whatever. Why are you judging me now? And be careful about judging me because I'm quiet and I'm doing what I have to do. And the actual quietness to his performance is amazing to me because he's the lead character who seems like he's not in the movie as much as he is, but he's constantly there. And he's constantly got something on his mind that one has nothing to do with what's going on. I find that fascinating, but yet when he is on screen, you are focused on him. It's an amazing performance, and I'm glad he won the Oscar because it's a performance of subtlety. I like that. I like it when you don't have some big Oscar over the top moment. Not that I mind those moments at all. I like it when there's this thing that's brewing in the character that you're not sure where it's going and what it's doing. And when he does something, what's the guy's name who is the quiet one who's shell-shocked? Is it Joe or Joseph or Frank? What's his name? He's a character who just kind of sits on his bunk and doesn't do anything. And he's shell-shocked. I can't think of what his name. I think it was Frank. Anyway, there's a moment when William Holden gives him his food or gives him a cigarette or something. And I'm like, that's so brilliant because you just learned as an audience member, this guy's not what they're making him out to be. And so, yes, it's an intense escape movie. And yes, it's heart pounding at the end. And yes, I feel so sorry for that guy in the water tower because you can imagine how cold that was. And yes, you want them to get out of the situation, but it's actually a character-driven movie based on situations that are out of people's control. And that's another thing that these movies have in common. And William Holden doesn't do any of the normal things that a character in a prison movie or prisoner of war movie or escape movie does. He never does that. Okay, guys, you beat me up, but I forgive you. I'll see you on the streets. He's like, the hell with you guys. And if I see anybody on the street, I'm not talking to you. So don't even, he does not have hope. He does not have anything but ambition to get out of there or survive. And to me, that's honest. So, I mean, some people might think I'm a little twisted psychologically, but I admired his character. I would want to be like that if I was in that situation, which I hope I never am in that situation. But yeah, I love this movie.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely living his truth and being himself, and he's looking out for number one. But at the same time, he also makes calculated decisions as far as like, does he tell about, like when he finds out about the snitch, does he tell about the snitch or does he hold that back? Like there's different, you're right, it's a quiet performance, and his performance up to that point where he's at that kind of crossroads, he has to determine like how he gives out that information and his kind of reveal of, you know, interrogating the guy about Pearl Harbor and all that stuff. It's a super kind of like tense scene, and it's really well done. I thought that because it could have gone a couple different ways, but I thought that was really well done. And that was one of the, I mean, because I think the first Billy Wilder movie I saw was The Apartment, and then, you know, kind of going back through Billy Wilder's filmography, there's just some amazing stuff in there. And he's another one of those, you talk about Ang Lee. I mean, look at Billy Wilder's filmography. It's just like, you can't tell what he's going to do next. There's no way.
Well, when his name comes up, you think you're getting Some Like It Hot. You think you're getting something other than what you get. And there's a lot of levity in this film. There's a lot of comedy in this film, but something's different in this movie than, yeah, you're totally right. He's going to be the first example, and then Ang Lee will be the second example of which one of these don't go with the other.
It seems like he's more interested in subverting your expectations of him, you know, and of challenging himself and of putting himself in a different situation, and trying to get something new out of the medium of film, than just like, you know, making a paycheck. I'm sure he made a paycheck too, but still, it's just, I'm super interested in that outlook. And he's working within a system, but then at the same time, he's able to, I mean, he's working within the studio system. So, I mean, he's got, you know, big paychecks, and you don't think he is?
No. I'm shaking my head because I'm looking at his biography now, and I'm like, Double Indemnity, The Lost Weekend. Yep. Okay, you can kind of put those together. And then Sunset Boulevard, you can kind of put those together. Sabrina, hello. Left Turn.
Yeah, I just saw that like 6 months ago. Yeah.
Stalag 17 back to kind of something like it. But The Apartment, which is, what is The Apartment about? The Apartment is about a guy who lets his apartment be used for his business people to have sex in. What?
That's right. And then he has to deal with a prostitute who wants to kill
Who's
herself.
trying to kill him. Yeah. What? Best Picture. Yeah, they got us fooled. I said this earlier today. I was talking to somebody about the 50s and the 60s. They have us fooled. These movies that were made in that time frame do not represent what we have as an image about the 50s. It is not pearls and poodle skirts in these movies. When I think of From Here to Eternity, it blows my mind what that movie is about. Donna Reed is known for being Donna Reed. She plays a prostitute who wins the Oscar. So whatever. That whole movie is crazy. So anyway, yeah. So Billy Wilder's amazing. And I loved watching Stalag 17 again because I know that I will experience it again. And this time I'll hopefully remember it. But I know I'm going. Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, who knows? I mean, I guess when you put so much in, you can only hold on to so much. And then I don't know why, because normally movies stick for me. That was what was perplexing about it. But I have a confession about a book later on that we're going to talk about that blew my mind. Anyway, so you want to move on?
Let's go to Great Escape.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go to Great Escape because it's somewhat, I mean, it's just kind of like a different, it's like everything in Stalag 17, like turned up to 11.
Yep.
And it's like things are bigger. Everything's just bigger. And you got more people. You've got bigger, I don't want to say bigger stakes, but just like everything is just increased. And I think that they do take advantage of the medium. I do think that, because I started watching some scenes last night, and I think that the movie could probably, because it's super long. It's
It is super
2
long.
hours and it's like almost 3 hours long.
Yeah, it's
like
super
they could
long.
probably cut some of the Steve McQueen riding on a motorcycle stuff, and I would probably be fine. I mean, like,
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
good, like watching him ride on a motorcycle for 5 minutes, maybe not 15 minutes, but yeah. But a lot of the other stuff, I was really excited about seeing how they dug all of the trenches. And, you know, they got Tom, Dick, and Harry, the 3 different trenches. They're diversifying, and they're trying to make sure that they don't put all their eggs in one basket. I totally understand all that stuff. And this is another one of those movies where, like, and I think even Richard Attenborough does kind of say in his like speech, he's like, this is what we're here to do. We're here to make sure that we are the most annoying people ever to these guys. And we want to make sure that, you know, like we spend all of our waking hours trying to escape and, you know, having them come and find us, because we're just these annoying mosquitoes all over the place trying to disrupt.
Is it in this
So, yeah.
movie that he says that it's a British officer's duty to try to escape? Is that in this movie? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it is, yeah.
Which I never thought of that before. I never thought that. You always think of escaping because you don't want to be in the situation, and it's hardcore being in a war camp, prisoner camp. But you don't think of as it being, like you said with the Grand Illusion, that it's your duty to disrupt the enemy, even if you're stationary. So you do everything you possibly can do to make their life difficult, because you're right, because the focus should not be an easy peasy prisoner of war camp so they don't have anything to think about. They should be thinking about how much of a disruption you are to them.
It's also bad for the, you know, in this case, the Nazis. It's bad for the Nazi troop morale. It's bad for the, you know, publications. Like, oh, they, you know, and there's, oh, we got more people out, you know, more people escaped. You know, there's just holes everywhere in all these POW camps. The Germans don't know how to deal with POWs. Like, they're just a mess, you know. How can they be a superpower if they can't even keep a bunch of people in a prisoner of war camp? You know, all of it kind of like builds on itself.
So my understanding is that this is all true. It's just there are characters that are 4 different people blended into one, and that situations where time frames were changed, obviously. But the idea of putting, it seems like it sounded like a really good idea to the Nazis, or to whoever came up with this idea in the Nazi regime, that they put all of the great escape artists from prisons of war into one place so you can watch them all at one time. Technically speaking, when that idea first came out of their mouth, they probably were like, yeah, good idea. But really, it's the dumbest idea in the world, because your chances of having somebody try to escape are even like, how many people tried to escape this one time? 75 or 250 or whatever they were going to do. And what? That's a really dumbass idea. So
Yeah,
not only
it's
do we
the dream
hate you,
team. You're
yeah,
you're making the dream
yeah,
team.
yeah. I mean, if he couldn't escape from your prison over here, and he couldn't escape, and the reason why he's here is because they tried to escape, putting them together might come up with a better idea how to escape, like allowing 250 people to try to escape. It's really a dumbass idea, and it makes it not that it's ever hard to hate the Nazis, because it's super easy to hate Nazis because of for all the
Yeah.
obvious reasons. But when they do such dumbass stuff like this, you're like, jeez, God, Lord have mercy. No, you're awful on so many levels, but you're also dumbasses. You know, like, what were you thinking? Anyway, political soapbox. I'm done.
But still, and I'm amazed at seeing like, all these guys, Charles Bronson being, everybody's got their own role. And I think that's really cool.
And he's amazing. He's amazing in this. I don't think I've ever seen Charles Bronson is better in any other film.
Especially at the end. Like,
it's borderline Oscar nominatable in my opinion. He's amazing in that tunnel, and how he's and if you go back and watch the film again, because I went back and watched some other sequences, the way he looks around when he's doing the digging, it's colored differently once you find out what his character's really thinking. Once you know what he's really thinking, you're like, oh, he's not looking around for safety purposes or to make sure this or to make sure that. He's looking around because he's frightened to death to be in these tunnels, and there's a backstory that you find out later on. Brilliant, because at the end when he's going through it's so well done. It's so
and he's going
well acted.
backwards. Everybody else
and then the lights
is
go out. And
leaving.
you're like, of course the lights are going to go out when he goes through it. Of course they are. It's devastating. I will say this, and we could probably move on, because all of these movies that we're talking about, we could spend 5 podcasts on them and never really talk about them. You know what I mean? Like, they're just infinitely interesting. I will tell you this. I wish that somebody, and I'm glad that nobody did, but I wish that somebody would have kind of let the cat out of the bag with The Great Escape and let me know what's happening at the end, because it is really The Great Escape / the most depressing ending to any movie ever. Because on some level, statistically, maybe not everybody's going to get through. But the way that they're so confident, and Steve McQueen is the coolest guy in the world, and Richard Attenborough, he's great, and they just have this bravado about him. You're thinking they're going to get all 250 people out, and there's going to be a scene where the Nazis are going through the camp, and there's just going to be dust blowing in the wind and blankets moving, and they're all going to be empty. I'm fine with not all 250 getting out, but I am also, spoiler, it's also uber depressing that out of 75, only 25 really survive that we know of.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, can just one of these people that you have ingratiated yourself with, that you've come to love, just one of them, when Donald Pleasant gets killed, it's like, oh no. James Gardner is willing to sacrifice his life for a blind man, because that's what that film at its core is about. The human condition, and it doesn't matter that he's blind. He needs to escape too. And to have that compassion, and then you're like, don't say things. There should be like somebody in a movie that says, don't say things like that. Because every time you do, when James Gardner says, all we have to do is blah, 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 and we're out of German territory in 20 minutes, I was like, oh no. Because you're thinking they're definitely going to get out. You're thinking they're definitely going to get out, but then they don't. And you're like, well, they had the plane. If the people in the plane couldn't get out. And then you have Sir Richard Attenborough, and you're like, he has to be in Jurassic Park, so he has to get out. He has to, And it's so messed up what happens to him at the end of the film, and it's devastating. And I disagree with you about the time frame and the motorcycle chase. I think it's the
you
best
like it all that?
All of it.
Really?
I think yes, I would never say this publicly, but I think maybe you could trim 15 or 20 minutes off of this movie, and I would be okay with that. I never have a problem with a long movie, but this movie is long, and there's not anything I would say is unnecessary, but there are things that could have happened quicker, in my opinion. That said, it is one of the great escape movies of all time, pun intended. But that scene is so well done, and it is the scene that's in the lexicon of our filmology and our
Yeah.
brain. That is the scene. And so to see it actually play out, especially after the next, get caught, you're thinking,
Yeah.
okay, it's Steve McQueen. He's going to get out. And then he doesn't. So I think they could have trimmed somewhere along the lines, if you were to ask my opinion off the record, not being recorded. I think they could trim this film. I'll deny I ever said that because I don't have the balls to say stuff like
Of course you
that.
will.
But that's not where they should trim it, because that scene, being the length that it is even that much more devastating when he doesn't achieve what you're hoping he can achieve. And the fact that you're still hoping he can stand up and take his sweater off and he'll get through that barbed wire. He'll be on Switzerland's line. And you're still thinking that. So the infinite hope you have is mesmerizing.
Yeah, the moment that I knew he was kind of like doomed is when he's like driving through a bunch of like Nazi guys, and a Nazi guy's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then he kind of like, he's like, "What, me?" And then he comes over and just like freaking kicks the guy in the chest, and then goes away. I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is not gonna end well." Because you got all these other guys coming after him. So yeah, I don't know.
You know, somewhere in my delusions of my mind, I think he escaped. I don't know. Something about he's too cool to have had the destiny that he had.
Well, I guess we can kind of keep going somewhat chronologically and talk about Cool Hand Luke. I absolutely adore this movie. I think it's so kind of like under the radar. I mean, I know that a lot of people like the movie, but I think that it's really a main character that is really complex and is there to kind of be a representation. I think, I don't know, I've talked about this movie before and about that character before. You can say that there's messianic versions of that character, but I think the biggest thing that he does is he subverts expectations at every turn. And I think that as the movie goes on, he starts to find himself, and it is an interesting character arc. And I watched a couple scenes last night, and one of them I was just kind of skipping through scenes, and then it came to the scene where he saw his mom. I guess I should probably say something about Cool Hand Luke. Cool Hand Luke is about a guy who's sent to kind of like a southern chain gang for cutting the heads off of parking meters. He's a previously highly decorated war hero who ended up leaving the military, like busted all the way down to private. So he did something to make somebody mad in the military, and then got kind of kicked out of the military, and then started cutting heads off parking meters, and now he's in jail for something as stupid as that. So he meets a bunch of different people, one of which is George Kennedy, who plays Dragline, who is great in this film. There's a lot of amazing characters, amazing actors. Strother Martin plays the warden. You got Harry Dean Stanton, Dennis Hopper, all kinds of people. So if you haven't seen Cool Hand Luke, you definitely need to go see it, or seek it out, because it's super fun and easy watch. There's a lot of bad stuff that kind of goes on in it to certain characters, but I think you get a lot of it probably. But okay, so the scene that I watched that I was going to skip was when he goes to see his mom, who is in the back of this truck, and she's getting ready to pass on. She's sick. I think she has some sort of like, not bronchitis. What's the thing that you get? Emphysema. She probably has emphysema. And so she's like on her way out, and I was getting ready to skip that. I was like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. And then I was like, okay, wait a second. I need to watch this again. And so I saw that scene, and it meant something totally different to me than in the past, because it's ultimately him realizing that he's going to have to figure out who he is as a human being, because it can't be defined by him trying to make his mom happy, and by him trying to make other people happy, and by other people. He has to define his life himself, and no one else can have that control over his life. And the very next scene is when they get sent out to this road and they got this tar truck, and the tar truck is going up the road, and they're like, all right, you got to tar this whole road today. And he just starts busting his butt, and Dragline's like, why are you going so fast? And he's like, let's go. We got to do this. Let's get done. And so Dragline kind of gets caught on, and they don't really know why they're doing it, but ultimately they kind of all start to take control. They have the ability to control their actions and what they do, and they're working together as a team. And by the time that they get done with the road, there's a couple hours left in the day, and it's just like they were able to do that. They wrestled control from the guards in a way that once again circumvented the structure and the rules, and they were able to take a piece of themselves back from this situation that they were in, and they were able to feel like humans again, or feel like full individuals again. And I think that's super cool. I'm gonna cheat and skip ahead to one scene in Shawshank Redemption because I also rewatched that.
I was gonna do the exact same thing. I was heading down that road.
Also involves tar.
Yeah, there's two themes that you brought up that are in all of these movies. You are not the sum total of where you're at right now because you're in prison. You need to find out who you are and be who you are because they can't take that from you. That's in all of these movies. And of course, when Morgan Freeman says, I think he just did it to feel normal again. The reason why he got the beer for them was just to feel normal again. And man, that movie lump in the throat the whole way this last time watching it. I could not stop being emotional watching Shawshank Redemption this time. It's amazing. And Cool Hand Luke, that scene in particular with his mother, I think is profound that you picked that one out because I think it is the best scene in the movie, and it's one scene after great scene after great scene. And by the way, George Kennedy won the Oscar for this movie, deservedly so. But it's not about a mother-son conflict. It's not. You would think that when you first see that a mother's coming, that she's going to be like, why did you turn out the way that you turned? What did I do so wrong? She's not doing that at all. She's like, I loved you. You loved me. I treated you fair. What happened? Figure it out. Go for it. And the way that it's done and the way that it's written is brilliant. But anyway, so what were you going to say about Shawshank?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, the tar scene, them tarring that roof and him being able to wrestle a little bit of control from the guards. I mean, he had to kind of like come at it in a different way. Like, I'm just trying to help you out, man. Oh yeah. But the fact that he's able to, to give these other guys the same feeling that he had, he was going to get that feeling no matter what, because he was able to ply his craft and able to feel more like the Morgan Freeman narrator says, like Red says, feel more normal. And he was able to give those other guys the ability to feel normal. They do a hard day's work and they get the respite of a few cold beers at the end, just like they did if they were tarring their own roof. There's no difference for them for that short period of time that, for them. And they were able to kind of like escape for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then they got to go back to the real life, but they still get that little bit of a respite. So yeah, those two together. And I just thought it was super weird that they both involved tar, but they're very, they're like the same scene. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think that Frank Darabont had anything to do with that. And I did read the Rita Hayworth short story beforehand, but I don't know if that particular scene was in there or not. But still, I don't think it was necessarily an homage to Cool Hand Luke, but they were very similar scenes in those two films. But did you have anything to say about Cool Hand Luke? Or
no,
he obviously tries to escape a bunch. So
yeah, it's a fantastic movie. A friend of mine turned me on to it 30 years ago, and I'll never forget it because it was one of those films that I went, why haven't I seen this yet? And I was pretty mature in my movie-going experience at that point, meaning I was aware that movies were bigger than just entertainment for me at that point. They were an art form, and the performances are stunning in this movie. But the thing that I think needs to be mentioned that we haven't talked about, and you mentioned it just briefly, is that this is like a southern plantation farm type place. And for whatever reason, that makes me that much more scared for characters going into this prison. And when you're going to mess with Mr. Walton, of all people in the beginning of a movie. I don't know if you ever watched The Waltons, but okay. You never watched Goodnight, John Boy? You never seen that TV show? Okay.
Nope.
Well, we are quite a couple of
It wasn't on
decades.
TBS when I was a kid, so I didn't see it.
Yeah, me either. Anyway, you would know what I was talking about, that this is a character you just don't mess with in the beginning of a film. And, you know, he goes into the hole and you're like, wait. And that's devastating enough for any character to go in the hole, no matter what prison movie you're in. But there's something about the Southern farmland chain gang thing that frightens me even more than A Prisoner of War and even more than Shawshank Redemption, although that movie scares me too. And all of these movies tap into some kind of fear of being locked up. The reason why Shawshank works as well as it does is for a lot of obvious reasons, but he is innocent. And you believe and know he is innocent from the beginning of that movie. You just do. Even if you're having to be proven that he's innocent throughout that movie, which you do have that proven, you still sense it. You still, something about Andy is, he's a good, righteous person. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that farmland chain gang thing scares me to death. I don't know why, it just does.
And that actually brings up a couple things. Brings up the warden, first of all, which, I mean, we've obviously talked about wardens in a couple of these movies. But yeah, the Strother Martin character, one of the things that he says in there is that is he gives them the illusion of control. Like, he's like, it's up to you. Like, it's like the first scene, you know, the first dialogue scene in the film where he's like, it's up to you to be okay. Like, you determine whether this is going to be a good stay or not. But ultimately, that's not true. I mean, they don't determine anything. So they're having to, you know, wrestle control for just the smallest amounts of things. But it's that kind of illusion of, oh, we're all in this together. That's not the case. The warden's not there to say we're all in this together. The warden's there to keep them from getting unruly. But also in a lot of these movies, you have these kind of like the Darth Vader characters. In this one, in Cool Hand Luke, you definitely have that one in the boss, the guy with the mirror sunglasses, and where he kind of, you know, he's iconic, where he's got the mirrored sunglasses and he carries around the bolt to the bolt action rifle so that they can have a rifle out there and nobody else can use it unless he has the bolt. I mean, it's those kind of, I don't know. I like the ceremony of all that, and seeing him even especially during that scene where they're tarring the road and he just like doesn't know what to do. Like, he can't show any kind of emotion because that would be him admitting defeat or admitting weakness. And I think that's an interesting dynamic to be played, where they're kind of playing by the rules, but also the inmates are playing by the rules, but they're also kind of winning, which shouldn't be able to happen if you play by the rules in this structured environment. So I don't know. I really like that part. Oh, I just saw Escape from Alcatraz like last week. Never seen it before. So it's a weird movie. But it's just not like, I mean, spoilers for real life Escape from Alcatraz, because it's based on real life. It just ends. Like, that super bugged me. And I know that's what it's supposed to do, like what's what really happened, I guess. But it felt kind of empty at the end. But I did like Clint Eastwood in this film, and I thought that it was it's such a cool procedural film, like just the like point, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I really enjoyed that, and you get shades of Brooks in there too, like the Brooks character from Shawshank Redemption. You get shades of that character, the guy who, you know, chops off his fingers and stuff. So the paint guy, and it's just so sad. I mean, both of those characters are just like super sad. You know, someone who they have one purpose. They found their one respite in life, and it's been able to be given to them, and then for whatever reason it gets taken away from them. You know, their purpose is removed, and they just don't see any recourse. And that's just, it's such a, I mean, I know it's real, but it's just super sad. But the hope that we get in this film is from their ability to try to escape. But this one also has the warden and all that stuff too. But the warden who says nobody's ever escaped and nobody's ever escaped and lived.
They need to hire me. I need to jump into frame and go, don't say that. Because you have
Warden.
never seen a movie before. Don't say that. You know, the person who goes, don't go in there. Don't go in there. Like, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. Here's why I think Escape from Alcatraz is an interesting movie. Because you take all of the stuff that we just talked about and strip it away. It's not character based. You don't know what Clint Eastwood did. You don't know if he's innocent or guilty. You don't really know anything about any of whether or not, you know, everybody says that I'm innocent like they do in Shawshank. You don't know anything about these people other than they need to escape because you cannot keep people caged in. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm saying that this is a theme that comes from this movie. So for me, it's the last movie of the bunch that I just watched, and I saw Escape from Alcatraz in the theaters. So this is definitely be the episode that dates me. And I remember thinking at the end of the movie, well, what happened? Did they get away? Do we not get any of that stuff? This time, I think procedural is the perfect term to use for this film. This movie is about the steps that they took to escape from Alcatraz. It's not about, it is a little bit about character choices because of the painter and the guy who has the mouse, which is sort of a split of the character from Shawshank Redemption, because both Brooks
That's true, yeah.
Has an animal too, which is a theme in all these movies too, or a characteristic that most of these movies have, a befriended animal, mouse. It's in The Green Mile. It's in Shawshank Redemption.
It's a dependent, yeah.
Yeah, somebody who is, and literally it's, you know, it's not even symbolic in Shawshank Redemption. It's a bird that gets to fly away, you know?
That's true.
In Escape from Alcatraz, he's painting a bird that looks just like the bird from Shawshank Redemption. Obviously it's not, but it's a bird busting out of a cage, and you see the cage. And that's when his, the character in Escape from Alcatraz, when his cell gets turned over, that's the painting he's working on. That is the last thing that the guard takes as he's walking out. It's the bird.
Yeah, Doc is the character's name.
Doc, yes. He's great in that too. Do you have the actor's name?
It's Robert Blossom. Do you know, when I saw it, Steph and I were watching it, and I was like, I know that guy. And then I had to look him up. He's the old man from Home Alone with the shovel at the end.
Yeah, I love that.
And I was
I love that. It's so sweet.
Yeah.
The end of that movie is so sweet because of him, because of the circumstances and meeting him. Yeah, it's sweet. Anyway, so I accepted Escape from Alcatraz differently this time. Because it was just procedural, I needed to know if this drill that was made from a fan is going to work, and how did that work with the noise, and these raincoats, how are they going to blow them up? And what about the water? What about the temperature? What if so-and-so doesn't have this? So all of those things are explored. And so at the end, they got away. And it is a fact that they got away. And another thing is, if you're a warden in a prison, you need to watch these movies because it never works out for you. You can be the biggest jerk in the world. It never works out for you. And I use jerk because I've already cussed in this episode. That is not the word I would choose to use. But it never works out. And you always get your due. And it's the worst in Shawshank Redemption. But you know something is similar going to happen to this warden in Escape from Alcatraz. Because the last scene with him is, you're being called up to so-and-so. They want to speak with you. And that's it. He's done, you know, and then they say in the credits at the end that Alcatraz was closed down a year later. Now, I don't know if it has something to do with the escape or if it's just not financially.
Multiple things. I read about that. It was multiple things. It was expensive. Yeah. They had the escape, and it was also crumbling. The actual building was crumbling.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you're not thinking
buildings.
In the future with something like that, because once again, it's like the Nazis, not comparing these people to the Nazis, but their thought pattern is, oh yeah, let's put it in the rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay. No one will be able to escape from that. Well, what about 15 years from now when the salt and the water and the people deteriorate what is the stuff made of? Oh, water and rock? Oh, okay, yeah. Like nobody thought they don't see the future. Anyway, not that I have anything against people who plan that kind of stuff. I just think it's kind of strange that they don't think that way. So yeah, so I enjoyed it for what it was. I like Clint Eastwood much better as a longer film going person as I've become. I can appreciate his nuances now. I used to think of him as like, Mae West, that he had a shtick and that's all he could do. But this performance is actually really nice. It's kind of Andy Dufresne from Shawshank Redemption with a lot of anger behind it. It's like this smoldering anger that he's got. We don't know why, and I'm fine with that. We don't need to know why. It's just the thing. It's like basic core elements of the script the director decided to focus on. When you see Clint Eastwood's record in the beginning of the film, it says intellect superior or superior intellect. So he's the smartest guy in the room. And that's what they clinged on to. They went with that theme and that theme only. And I'm good with that. So my heart was racing a little bit during the end of the film. The blood was running and I enjoyed it. So I think it's worth watching.
Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely was one of those like extended. I don't even think it had a score. I don't think it had a score. So like during that extended period where they're breaking out and where they're kind of like waiting, maybe it did have a score. I don't know. It just seemed like I was super tuned into the noises they were making or trying not to make, and like, jumping up and trying to, grab each other. And the guy who ripped his raincoat setup, so then he didn't have his own, life jacket. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, it was definitely touch and go. Even though I knew of an escape attempt, I just didn't know if it was going to be successful or not, all that stuff. So, but yeah, well done film. And I think was it considered like a popcorn movie in 1979 when it came out? Or was it more of like this is an austere film that, serious people need to take serious?
No, I don't think things were looked at like that back then. It was a general public movie. Clint Eastwood star. You went to see it because it was a Clint Eastwood movie. It would be no different if it was Clint Eastwood and Cool Hand Luke. It's a star vehicle. Now, Cool Hand Luke is different because it's structurally different. It's telling a different story. It has a different purpose. I don't think one is better than the other per se in what you choose to do. I find Cool Hand Luke infinitely watchable. And I think Escape from Alcatraz, once you know all of the bings and whistles, you might be like looking in different directions during the film. There are so many things to cling on to textually in all these other films. So yeah, I wouldn't say it was a popcorn movie, but I would say it was a Clint Eastwood movie, and that was the reason to go see a film.
Okay, well, that makes sense. But at the same time, I guess for me, I feel like, revisiting Cool Hand Luke every year or two is something I'm just going to keep doing, whereas I don't feel as drawn. I just saw it, but I don't feel like I may be as drawn back to Escape from Alcatraz, because it's kind of like we saw the magic trick, and like now that I know the magic trick, like I don't necessarily have to like think about it as much anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of what I just said, but probably in the Josh kind of way that you do things. Well, here's how I'll reframe that, so it doesn't sound like a negative. Not that you did. I'm just saying so people don't perceive us as being kind of bagging on Escape from Alcatraz. Escape from Alcatraz is one of those movies. If it came on, I would watch it, and I would be entertained, and I would watch it again. It's not one that I seek out in this genre. It's not like. Yes, I was enthused about seeing it again and remembering it again, but I pretty much remembered it. But Shawshank Redemption lit me up again and had me, I was a mess.
Let's talk about it. I was trying to go like chronologically, but I don't know if you got anything from 79 to 94.
No, nothing that's important.
There you go.
You got Midnight Express in there. That's pretty great.
Which I haven't seen. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
That one, or Victory, or Escape to Victory, the Sylvester Stallone movie with Michael Caine. I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah.
The soccer one.
Victora. Yeah, I've seen that. I loved it. Midnight Express is not a movie that you can just lightly talk about. So it's something that if we ever do part 2 of prison escape movies, you have to see Midnight Express because it's daunting. It is really hard.
Was it like a guy in a Turkish prison or something?
Yes.
Is that what it is about?
Yes.
Okay, got
it.
Who
tried to smuggle drugs out of the country. by taping them to his body, and he gets caught. Yeah, it's a tough movie.
No.
It's a tough movie. But anyway, not that Shawshank Redemption is not a tough movie. It is a tough movie. But I'm going to say this, and I don't know if I ever thought I would say something like this, but here it is. Shawshank Redemption is a perfect movie. Period.
Woo.
It's a perfect movie. Name one part of that movie that is flawed. Name one part of it that immediately comes to mind that could be just like tonally strange or is a little wonky in their approach to the dialogue. There's not one unnecessary scene in that movie. The performances are stunning all the way down the line. Any of the comical, farcical stuff that you get for levity in these movies is done in a realistic kind of way. The character choices that they make, the stuttering guy, which is something in all of these prison movies, by the way. There's a stuttering guy. As a matter of fact, Stalag 17 is narrated by the stuttering guy.
Yeah. And Dennis Hopper plays the stuttering guy in Cool Hand Luke. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not bad enough you're in a prison movie with horrible people around you trying to do horrible things to you, but let's give you some kind of malformity that puts you at lesser odds than everybody else. Let's just do that because it's not hard enough. Anyway, I rewatched it and I'm thinking to myself, I cannot think of a moment that isn't perfect. There's not one moment. And even if you try to give it to me right now, I'm going to be in denial about it because I can't believe that movie I have seen, I would venture to say, at least a half a dozen times, if not more. Is it not? You see it as if you've seen it for the first time every time you see this movie. Even though you know it, even though you know what the poster is for, when you see it again and Morgan Freeman in his Oscar-nominated role looks into the camera and down the hole, that look of what is going on? What's happening here is original every time you see it. Every single time you see it. The fear in Morgan Freeman's eyes when he wakes up to see if Red is still in his cell the night that he escapes is devastating. The look on Morgan Freeman's face the night that the very first night when they find out the next day that the young guy he actually got killed because he got beaten up in the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
They call him Fat Guy, and I just, Fat Boy or whatever they call him. I don't know the character's name. New Fish. It's so perfect. Tim Robbins, I don't think has ever been better. That scene when he does the whole get busy living or get busy dying sequence is just cinematic art. There is nothing wrong with this movie. What's wrong with this movie? Nothing. Nothing. And want to hear a small little trivia thing for me? I read a lot of Stephen King and have read a lot of Stephen King. And I have read The Four Seasons, which that short story, Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, comes from that. The Body, which is Stand By Me, Apt Pupil, which is Apt Pupil. And the best story, in my opinion, is a story called The Breathing Method, which has not been made into a movie. I have read all three of those stories, but I have never read Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption. I've never read that short story. And I figured out why when I was watching it this time. There is this process that my mind goes through where I don't do the book is better, movie's better, the play's better. I don't do any of that. I do what can I learn from the new medium that I'm experiencing this story through. So if I've seen the movie first and then read the book, I'm finding out new details that add to that story. That's why I'm wanting to read about it. That's why it was fascinating to talk about Fight Club from book to movie, page to screen, if you will. I am afraid to read that short story because I don't want anything touching this movie. I just don't. And I love Stephen King. I love the source material. I will eventually read it. It's probably going to go on my goal for this year to read it, but I don't want it touched because I'm not the only one who thinks Shawshank Redemption is a perfect movie, because on IMDb, on Metacritic, it's the highest rated movie so far and has been since its premiere. It's always been the
Yep.
highest ranked movie on IMDb and Metacritic.
Yes, I was looking that up. Yeah, I was gonna say, oh, so you mean you agree with all of the people who voted for best movies on IMDb? So, yeah, I mean
No,
that's
my
decent
point is
company.
that they all agreed
That's not
with me saying it was a perfect film,
That's
and
right,
they back
of course.
me up in my opinion that it's a perfect film because I did not look that up until after I decided it was a perfect movie this last time. Then I went and looked it up just to go down a rabbit hole, and I was like, oh, it's the
Yeah.
top rated movie on Metacritic. Go figure.
So, well, I mean, I don't really have too much to say about Shawshank Redemption, but maybe I can land this plane of prison escape movies by trying to relate The Grand Illusion to Shawshank Redemption, much in the same way that the top general in The Grand Illusion uses his relationship with the Eric von Stroheim character to take it. He takes advantage of that to get his fellow countrymen out, and he does the same thing to get himself out because he's able to ingratiate himself to the warden, and he's able to meet the warden on the same level intellectually or even higher than the warden really, but then also appreciate things like opera and all of these different things, nice things, opera, fancy things, the law. He's able to kind of like show that he's, differentiate himself from all of these other people, but really ultimately he's the same as them, and he does care for the other inmates, but he's able to get the guard down on the warden to the point where he completely robs him blind, and that is just amazing to me. So it's such a great just desserts, I guess, whatever that phrase is. So it's a great way of kind of saying like, you get back what you put out, and he put out hate and he put out negativity, and now he loses everything to the point where he has nothing and he kills himself. So I guess we didn't say spoiler alert for Shawshank Redemption, but I'll have to say that. But
it's
way.
one of those movies that I think you could talk about infinitely in front of people, and until they see it, they're never going to experience it until they actually see it. And that actually brings me to one of my points about how perfect of a movie it is. The poetry of the language that is used is not only brilliant because of the metaphors and everything that's in the language, but he uses metaphors in the script. And Frank Darabont wrote the script and was nominated for the Oscar for it and Best Picture and a bunch of other things. But he says these poetic things. A character says something poetic, and then they top it with something else. So I didn't write down anything because I don't want to ruin it by trying to give my impression of the line reading of it. But it's just beautiful. The language is just beautiful. And he says so many things and then tops himself by saying even more magical things. And the reason why I thought of that was because you were saying his just desserts, because he uses all those biblical passages, by the way, which biblical references and religion is another connecting thread throughout all of these movies at some point. And obviously the Bible is in use in Alcatraz and Shawshank Redemption. And there are other things that they talk about in The Grand Illusion that have to deal with God and religion and all that other stuff, and The Great Escape. And Christmas is another theme that goes through most of these movies too, or some kind of celebration of Christmas, be it a song to hide the banging or whatever, or a pageant to make people feel normal, like in The Grand Illusion. And by the way, that one young gentleman dressed as a lady really is a beautiful lady in that film. Like when she walked out, I was like, she's gorgeous. When did they get girls? And I was like, oh wait, no, that's a guy. Okay, cool.
That's a dude. All those guys are guys. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, good for you, dude. You look good.
That's also a theme in those movies where they're trying to have some sort of sense of normalcy of like, oh yeah, I remember when I went dancing with my girl and all that stuff. And so some of the men decide to like be selfless enough to dress up like women to get that sense of normalcy. And like, I don't know, it's just, that is another thing that I noticed. I was like, because that was in Stalag 17 too, right?
Yep. There's
where they dance around.
Somebody
wears a mop on his head or something.
Yeah, well, that's that one character does that because nobody will dance with him, which is adorable. But yeah, then the drunk guy sees him and thinks he's Betty Grable. or Gable.
Oh, that's right.
Betty Grable.
Betty
what's her last name?
Grable. Yeah.
Betty Grable.
Clark Gable, Betty Grable.
Right. That's what's confusing me because he messes that up in the film, and he's like, no, because the one guy starts to do an imitation of Clark Gable. And he's like, no. So the beauty of that is that has nothing to do with men on men, anything. That has to do with people need companionship. And, men dancing with other men to celebrate Christmas is a beautiful thing. And it has no sexuality about it. It has to do with you have to have connection with human beings. And physical connection through dance is a beautiful thing. It's not sexual on any level. I mean, it might be for some of them, and good for them, because they're all massively good-looking movie stars. But I didn't get any of that impression. I didn't get any of those thoughts. I just thought they need to dance and celebrate Christmas. That's a beautiful thing. Anyway, getting your just desserts. So he uses all those biblical passages, right? And then the one that is stitched into the frame picture that's in front of his safe is not meant for Andy. It's not meant for Red. It's not meant for anybody who might have done something that has gotten themselves into Shawshank Redemption. It's meant for the warden at the end of that film. And the way that Frank Darabont shoots that scene, where you see that shot right before the cops show up and right before you figure out exactly what the warden's doing, is so brilliant, because he makes it so obvious what he's doing, but at the same time, it's done in a subtle way that it's not hitting you over the head, but you definitely get the message of, when you reread that and it has the word R-I-G-H-T in it, it's not about being right. Right will happen. So you better be right with what you do, because right will happen. It's cometh. It's coming. And so it's layered upon layer upon layer in this movie. So enough said about the most perfect film of all time.
Well, we can list a couple other ones. I'm going to have to really talk about them, but I did want to at least bring up, Steph and I just rewatched like a bunch of 90s movies, which I think we talked about a little bit last episode. The Fugitive would be one of them, where it's not like a prison break. It's just like their bus, gets knocked over in the train and all that stuff, which was shot in North Carolina, actually. So, kind of like out down south of Asheville and all that stuff. So that's another one. Another one that I haven't seen is Papillon. That's another Steve McQueen movie, actually, with Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman. Have you seen that one? I haven't seen it.
I have not, and they've remade it too. So no, I haven't.
Oh, that's right. A couple years ago, yeah. And then there's a couple other films. There's a Bresson film called A Man Escaped, which I have not seen, and that's another French filmmaker. So, and so I'm interested in seeking out more French movies, and so maybe I may look into that a little bit more. Brute Force, have you seen that with Burt Lancaster? I don't know if that has any prison escape anything or not. I don't know.
I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen the other one he's famous for, Birdman of Alcatraz. I believe
Alcatraz,
yeah, I believe that's Burt Lancaster too. I haven't seen that, but that
did he try to escape though? I don't think.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. They did on some of the Google searches, they would do prison/escape movies. So they would be about prison and or prison escape movies. So it was sometimes hard to tell what was what until I read the description.
I mean, there's some like tenuous ones, and there's others that I'm not even going to bring up, but I think we've got a pretty exhaustive list. I'll say Con Air. I mean,
yeah, I thought about that too. That came to my mind before I even saw a list. I thought, well, Con Air counts. All pairs in comparison after talking about Shawshank Redemption, though.
I know.
We're going to have to do part 2 and not try to make it a bad part 2. You know what I mean? Like, how somebody has a blockbuster and then they make Jaws 2 and you're like, why did you do that? So we're going to have to do a prison escape movie part 2. Maybe we'll do prison escape movies in other languages because, we only have one language and we need to expand our horizons. That's your word,
we're
not
loser
mine.
English speakers.
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, I guess that's it for this week. So you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and you can check us out on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll be there. All right, we'll see you next time.
Okay, so